Happy Monday and Happy New Year. This is God Talks and I'm Ryan Fleming. I wanted to follow up on the message from last week where we discussed establishing routines and setting goals that God guarantees would result in a closer walk with Him and in an intimate relationship with Him. So, with that in mind, I want to take the opportunity to take a look back at 2020 to try to learn from it, to gain perspective on it so that we can create a new perspective and a new positive approach in 2021. A couple years ago, I met a woman named Chris Bonneville. As 2020 approached, she sensed in her heart that God was telling her that 2020 would be a vital year where He would teach us how to see more clearly, that we would be given a perspective and vision as to who we are to grow to be as the Church of God. So with that in mind, I want to talk briefly about the story of Jonah. Most of you are familiar with that, but just to remind you, Jonah was instructed by God to go to Nineveh and to tell them that they would be destroyed in 40 days because of their vast wickedness. When Jonah finally brought the message, instead of them receiving the message and being destroyed, they repented. They turned, they changed their ways, and they appealed to God for mercy, and God was gracious and merciful, and He did not destroy them. So when we think about that, why would God tell somebody He's going to destroy them and then not? Well, because His purpose of warning people is to get them to turn back to Him, get them to repent. So, Amos chapter 4, we have God telling Israel that He actually brought upon them sicknesses and diseases and famines and plagues and things of that nature. And each time that He names one of the things that He brought upon them, He follows up with, "Yet you did not return to me." So again, we can see that not only does He warn people of what's going to happen so they return to Him, but sometimes He either directly inflicts or allows things to happen that would, in His hope, cause us to look to Him for mercy and for grace and for saving and for protection and for provision and whatever may be needed, because struggling kind of brings us to that place. So as we look into this new year and looking back on 2020, I want to quote Ephesians where it says, "We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but our fight is against spiritual powers in heavenly realms and dark places and evil principalities." That is where our war is. Our war is against the enemy in spiritual realms. But think about and focus on the first part of that sentence, which says, "We wrestle not against flesh and blood." So what that means is we are not to be fighting each other. Now obviously we look back on 2020 and we see a lot of fighting against each other. We see division, we see arguments, we see war. It's happening all over the world. And that is the enemy's work. That is him trying to pit us against each other. But Jesus said, even concerning our enemies and our persecutors, that we're to bless them, to pray for them, to love them. That is the opposite of wrestling and fighting against them. So even for those in your life that seem to be the hardest to live with, or even some that are doing wrong against you, sinning against you, offending you, trying to hurt you, even they are not our enemies. See, our call as children of God is not to fight against each other. It's to fight for each other. And this includes our enemies and those persecuting us. We must remember all human beings were created by God to be His child. Some have just forgotten who they are. Now Jesus on the cross said, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." He was asking the Heavenly Father to forgive those who were putting Him on the cross and crucifying Him. And He says they forgot, or they do not know what they do. And that's because they have forgotten who they are. If they had remembered that they were children of God, they would have recognized Jesus at least as a brother. So our job is not only to remind people of who they were created to be, but to show them. Jesus told His disciples before He ascended back into heaven after His resurrection that the works that He did while He was here on earth that they would do. He even said greater works would they do than the works that He did. He told them that we believers are going to be the light of the world. And that's very interesting because in another place He taught them that Jesus is the light of the world. So, in addition to the New Year's resolutions that I asked you to ponder that would enable you to experience a more intimate relationship with God, I think it's important that we endeavor to learn who we are. And not only that, but we must believe it. But how do we define who we are? Culture defines who we are. People around us tell us who we are. Our parents and the way they raise us gives us an impression and an influence of who we are. But no one else can define you, because that's God's job. So again, with New Year's resolution, I propose you do that study. Look to see in the Bible what the Bible and what God says about who we are. Because when we recognize who we are, we'll know our potential. We'll know what we're supposed to do, and He will show us how to do it. God would never ask us to do something unless He was not only willing to be the power behind doing it, but capable of being the power behind doing anything He asks us to do. I just read a story of an eagle being raised by chickens. Not knowing any better, it not only naturally acted like a chicken, it also thought itself to be a chicken. One day he saw a huge, majestic bird flying above and asked what it was. A fellow chicken told him it was an eagle, but that he needed not mind it, as chickens can never be like the king of birds. So he went back to pecking in the dirt and flying no more than a few feet at a time. Sadly, he died without ever realizing the potential that was given him. He died thinking he was just a barn chicken. Tim Hetzner, in response to this story, asked, "Who told you that you don't have potential? Who told you that you won't succeed in life or make an impact?" And Tim's answer was certainly not God. God does not tell us that. The enemy might be the one telling us that. He then reminds us of the story of Gideon. When the angel of the Lord called Gideon to deliver Israel from the Midianites, he responded with a litany of excuses about why he wasn't qualified for the job. But the angel told him, "The Lord is with you, you mighty man of valor. Go in this might of yours, and you shall save Israel. Have I not sent you?" Now notice two important things in this story. Tim points out, first, God spoke to the destiny within Gideon, not to his present circumstances. Second, God reminded him that it was not the power of the one being sent, but of the one sending him that would win the battle. So we have to think about our destiny, pray about our destiny, ask God what He created us for, what He wants for us to do to be a part of what He's doing in the world. In response to that story, Tim then reminds us that today you are mighty because God is with you. So remember, don't let the world around you define your value. That's God's job. In 2021, pray to God to reveal to you who He created you to be and who He's calling you to be. I can guarantee you He has plans for you and a part to play in His savings of lives. Thank you for joining me on God Talks. See you next time.